There we go. Thank you.
I'm wondering, can I get any more light, or this is, maybe tomorrow we could bring that light box over or something.
Maybe we could, I could try that while
How's it look on the
I
screen,
could try
bright
that
enough?
while you start. It looks, we'll come around for a second and have a look. I think it looks pretty good on the screen. Yeah, the screen is good.
Okay, all right. Yeah, it's not that saturated, Jeff. So thank you. Thank you. It's really great to be here tonight, or this afternoon. How many of you are here for the workshop? Okay, not quite half. Okay, so, yeah, I've been painting for a while. I did bring some of the magazines that I have articles in, or that I have my work in. And I have been on a long journey of trying to build my bio with entering national shows and winning awards, so because I'm an art school dropout. So I was always very intimidated when I would look at an art magazine and they'd have this credential and that credential and they graduated here and there, and I said, oh, I'll never get in a magazine. So I came up with that idea to just get keep improving my work. I've been rejected hundreds and hundreds of times from shows. I still get rejected from shows, and I just keep working. But once I started winning the awards, then you go to these shows and you meet people, and things happen and you get in magazines and everything. So it's been really good for me, and then wonderful societies or associations like yours hears about me and invites me. So it's really great to have the chance to come around and meet other watercolorists and share my knowledge that I've been painting for about 36 years in watercolor. So if I wasn't good by now, come on. So I'm glad that it's going better. But watercolor is a medium, as you know, is difficult to control. And what I want to teach is that you can control it. And it's all about knowing how much water is on my paper, how much water is in my paint, and how much water is in my brush. So I have a car wash sponge. I've got another one over here, wrapped in a couple sheets of paper towel. And when I'm painting, you'll notice that I'm always tamping off on my toweling, because it helps me know how much water's in my brush. When I do a lot of wet into wet painting, and if my paper's wet and my paint is fresh and thin and wet, and then I add water to it, my brush is wet, I add water to it, excuse me. I've got a puddle of colored water, and then I put it on my wet paper, and I come around to you and I say, where's that yellow? And you say, oh, I put it on. And I say, no, it disappeared. So you have to know how much water you've got and everything. We need water for watercolor. Water's the vehicle, but we can control where the paint goes by knowing what's wet and how evenly wet my wash is. In the workshop, we're going to find that. So let me start with this. So I started this already because in an hour I cannot paint a painting. I could do a tulip with a dark background or something. So I'm going to do a demonstration in Fort Worth, Texas next week for the Fabriano show that's coming. There's a watercolor conference in Fort Worth, and I'm going to paint this, and there I have an hour and a half. So I'm going to get this one close to done, and then I've got I drew it again, and I'll start that in front of them, and then I'll whip this one out that'll be farther along, and then I'll finish this so they can see how I start and how I finish. I thought that was a good idea. So I thought tonight, well, I'll go ahead and do this for you. Now, when I started this the other night, I actually wet the front and the back of the paper with under the sink. And you know what? I think instead of walking over there, I'll just use my sponge that I have right here. And I'm making sounds here, and I got my thing in the pocket there. Well, I'll just use this. I'm going to get this back wet. The reason I do this helps This is 140 pounds. This is actually arches. I've been using Fabriano, and I've been using a lot of different paints, trying to find, or papers, trying to find one that I just love. And I don't know, you know, Arches has been having a lot of issues with sizing, but this was some actually elephant-sized paper that I had, and I just thought, well, this will work. You know, I needed to cut 2 papers and all that. So if I wet the back of the paper and then stick it down to my board, this is going to give me more time to do my wet into wet washes. So now that I've already wet my paper, I can control where this paint's going to go by keeping parts of my paper dry. So the other day I had the whole thing wet, and now I've just got, I should have wet this when I first got here. In my studio, I'll wet the back and lay a piece of plexi on it, and it'll just flatten it right down. But this will be fine. I'm not going to work on the outside edges. So wetting the back of the paper, I'll have a little longer working time, especially here in Arizona where everything is so dry. I actually refilled my paints just the other day, and I set my paints out in my sister-in-law's garage, and they're dry. You know, they're dry. So I want my paints to set up, and I should introduce Liz. Liz and Donna are here, my visitors. Liz, I'm staying with Liz and her husband Marty, and Donna's here, her sister-in-law. So I've been hanging out with them, showing me a wonderful time. And but anyway, yeah, Arizona is amazing. So it's been a great visit. So I'll tape him down a little bit just because he's curling on me, because he knows I'm doing a demonstration.
Do you want the back of every painting you do, Kathleen?
No, it depends. If I'm doing something that is just going to be super detailed, you know, I'm trying to think what I'm working on. I wet the back a lot. Now in the workshop we're using 300 pound. I usually paint on 300 pound, but I just, like I say, this is 140. I don't usually use it, but it's fine. It's going to be fine. And this arches at this weight really glows, and that's what I want. So anyway, so now that I've got them taped down, what I did the other day is I started with my yellows, because I'm always working with triads. I'm sure you're all familiar with the color, complements. So I'll get into this in detail in the workshop, but all the complements are made from 3 colors, and I use them to make my painting. I want to direct what you're looking at, and I want to have as much drama as I can. It's always about drama, making the thing as interesting as I can. Now, I did a painting of this. If you follow me on social media, I did a painting of this recently that has the binoculars in, that my husband was out in the woods. It got the woods behind it. It just won an award, and the Righteousson portrait competition. I won first place. Well, Alan won first place. This is my husband. So anyway, what am I talking about? So now I laid down my yellow. Then I'll put in, during that workshop, or next week when I do my background, I'm going to paint him in, and then I'm going to create drama by using the pink and then the blue to create a gray. So whenever we mix a complement together, we gray it, or we can make a black. So when we use our complements together, or next to each other, I hope we all have learned that really makes our painting, the colors vibrate. You think about the blue ocean and a sky with an orange sunset, how the colors just vibrate. The red of a peony with the green petals at Christmas time. The 2 colors just create drama. So now, wherever I want a smooth edge, I want to wet the whole paper. So now I'm going to control where this wash goes. It won't go out here because I've only wet his face area. One mistake a lot of people make is, so I want this part of his forehead. You can all see the reference, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I want this part of his forehead to stay white, okay? I want a white here, here, maybe there. I can do some lifting later with my little scrubby tools, but a lot of times we think that we have to leave this whole, like we leave that dry and then we get a hard edge. On a man, we can have more texture, so it wouldn't be wrong, but later I would go to wet on dry to create more suggestion of lines. And my husband's real good about, you know, me showing his age in pictures. I painted him a few years ago, and he looked at it and he said, "Does my neck look that old?" And I said, "Well, yeah," but I said, you know, I had to exaggerate the textures and wrinkles to make it look more real. And then someone came over and he was explaining the painting and he said, "She had to exaggerate." And I thought it was cute that he said that. But he's a great sport. So I'm mixing up an orange here. I'm using my pink and my transparent yellow. I start with transparent staining paints because I want it to stay here. So if you can imagine, if I'm working with layers of glazes, so I'm working with layers of wet into wet glazes. So if I want the wash to stay where I put it, this brush is too small. So if I'm making too many strokes, my brush is too small. We want to use the biggest brush that we can so that we don't get a lot of marks. Let me see if this works. I'm really liking, for wet into wet washes like this, I'm really liking a rounded, like a filbert, or this was a cat's tongue before I beat it so bad. And this is one of my favorite brushes. It's a Cheap Joe's 50/50 watercolor brush, and they aren't quite as nice now. You know how that goes. You find something great, and then you try and reorder it, and then the quality's gone down a little bit. But because some of my students have ordered this, so you can try it, but great brush. Now, I just went over a little bit on my collar. If you can see in my reference, his shirt is going to be gray. So again, I said that if I mix my complements together, that's how I get my grays. So I know that the orange will be under the gray color. I'll actually do, maybe I'll do one side of the sweater and show you how you lay down that color and then you put the blue into it. And then that underwash shows through. The best way to get drama in your paintings is to do an underwash. I always try to do that. So if I'm painting something green and I lay down a pink wash, it's just going to vibrate and it's going to be beautiful. Let's see, so over here I should still be damp, and I am. So I'm going to start to turn up. Do you see how the paint is not going anywhere? This paper is still, well, this side's shiny wet. Let me see if I can tell. I think I'm losing my shine over here. So if I start to see dry brush marks, if that's not what I want, if I don't want texture right there, that's when I have to jump out of that area. So that's what I mean when I say that we have to know how much water is in our brush and our paper and our paints. So as long as this area is evenly wet, I can keep working in here. I can keep shaping this, and you know, so what I'm doing is I'm looking for his middle values. And I'm looking around here, like this peach comes up over here, so I'm just blending this in. I'm using a very light touch on the paper. The paper doesn't know I'm here. It's just like I'm whispering over. I am depositing paint. Now, if I keep working, where's the highlight? The highlight's right there, so I'll put a little bit here, And then I've got a little pencil there, and I like to cover that, so I will try to cover that by the time I'm done with this painting. And if I can't, I'll scrub it out. But so now I'm getting drier, and I can really draw on here. But if you're trying to do this, and my puddle's getting drier, this is not a puddle, this is color. There's a big difference between a puddle of color and just a drying patch of color. As a painting goes on, a lot of times I'm working out of dried things on my palette if I'm looking to get a saturation of color and really control where it goes. But see how this is, I don't know how well you can see, I'm depositing color and I'm getting soft edges still, but I'm not getting any movement. So the other night, this was a little rough looking, so I'm gonna come through here. This is all gonna have a darker color over it. So I'm just starting to feel, so when I look at the reference, I would, like on the nose, I always ask myself, how do I know, what's darker, the nose or the cheek? And I say, well, how do I see it? How do I see the nose? Well, I can see that the cheek side here is lighter than the nose. So right there I've got some color. And then down here, the nostril is lighter than the cheek. So you always have to be observing, how do I see that? So that's what I do. I go back and ask myself, if I can see a difference, even if it's subtle, I know there's something there that I can find and work with. So here, again, I'm still like really getting dry brush. If I get too dry, if my brush gets too dry, I don't deposit. So once I stop, but here, this is great. It's like, this is what you want. It's just damp. I call it damp brush. So I'm looking at the shape of the shadow here, but I'm just feeding this in here. And then I'm also reading color all the time as I'm looking with this, and I'm seeing that this area is going to be getting more yellow in it. So I'm going to get out of there because I have peach in my brush. So I look, where else can I put peach? His eye is not white, so I can get a little more color in here. But I'm drying. So now, if I was to make a new puddle of color and come in here, big mistake, what would I get?
Blossoms.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes we want blossoms if we're painting an angel's halo, but normally we're not looking for that. So now what I do, well, depending on, I could probably go somewhere else. I could re-wet this, although this is still wet. I've lost my shine. So once I've lost my shine, I'm too dry to introduce water. So the big thing, I should have a poster that I bring. As long as it's evenly wet, I can keep painting on it. Once I have got areas drier than another, I have to stop. Let me see if I can flatten this a little bit. It's getting a little bumpy, but it's not really bothering me. People say, do you ever tape your paper? No. When I first started in watercolor like 1,000 years ago, I had this teacher that was not very good. God rest her soul. Didn't learn much from her. And she wanted us to tape our paper down with tape, like the tape you wet from the post office. It never worked for me. They had you soaking your paper in the bathtub and all this crazy stuff. Well, it never worked for me. And then somebody, I was in the Niagara Frontier Watercolor Society. That's where I learned a lot. We had, well, they have, I'm a member, but I don't show anymore. But they have someone come in twice a year, like I'm coming here, a national artist. And somebody had come and just wet their paper and stuck down and, oh, I don't tape it, I don't bother with that. And I thought, wow, that's great. It's just like, the first time somebody came and said, I use white paint, what's the big deal? I was like, oh, because we have all these stupid ideas and all these rules that we think we have to follow, and all they really do is freeze us up. So I'm always looking to learn and try new things. Now, if you look at him, I can't hold him up. I taped this down so it wouldn't rock too much. He looks pretty red, doesn't he?
Yes.
Should I be worried about that? No. Okay. So what I'm going to do now, I guess I want to make sure, because my back is dry, or wet still, so I want to make sure this is dry to the touch, because if we go in too soon, I can move this. And that's how a lot of times, you know, you'll have something and you think it looks great, and all of a sudden, oh, I've got all these spots. Well, it's because you disturbed your underwash and it wasn't dry yet. Okay, have you all experienced that? It's like, what happened? It must be the paper. Well, maybe not. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's you. Okay, so let's look at what while I'm kind of letting that set. So now I can come up here and I can say, well, we certainly don't want just this white forehead. So I go back to my reference, and I'm always looking for information. Also, I want to mention that I'm not doing green this time. And if you come up in it later and look at my reference, there's definitely green in his skin. So this could be a red and green painting. I always think of it, this is an orange and blue, this is a red and green. So on my computer, I took some of the green out. It still looks green here, but I took some of the green out, and I'm just painting it the way I want to paint it. But, so anyway, if I look up here, now he does have some wrinkles. So that means that I'm going to be able to take a light wash. This puddle here that dried is quite light. So now one of the things I could do, see it taking out my excess moisture over on my sponge. One of the things I could do here is actually find some of his wrinkles. But that's usually something I do when I can get right next to it and go along. You know, I can see the texture of his pores in some places, and I will actually do that. But for this first one, I would just come really lightly through here and get a little feeling of this. It does not have to be exactly in the right place. And then if I look here, then that color goes up here. So I can wet on dry right onto here, and then I want to soften that up a little bit, pull some color in here. So like I say, now if this was a woman's face, we couldn't do this. We always want a woman's face to look smoother. And now on a man, it's easier because, and he really isn't white over here. He's got some color. So that also helps me to know how I have to paint this. It's really important, and I'll talk about that in the workshop, how I know how dark to go everywhere. It's really very important that I have a value pattern in my mind. And if you're new to painting and you find that, you know, you get into the painting and then you start to get lost, or it's like, oh, it's flat. It's flat because you have two values that should be different next to each other. So if you have two values that are too similar, so if I come down the side of his face and make that the same value as the background, I flattened the painting, okay? So I want this to read as a highlight, but this isn't white here. I don't think I need it to be white. Actually, since I'm putting a little color in, I could do the white background thing because I've got color outlining his face. So I should probably stay pretty light here because what's darker? This. Okay, this is going to be my dark. I already know that. I want this to be my dark and this to be my dark. The background will be a middle value bluish gray because it's the contrast. It's the complement. Does that make sense? Okay? So I don't want to paint the background this shade of orange and leave it the same value. It would be flat. So we always want to, so where we don't have a good value change, we want a color change. That makes you a colorist. I'm a value painter, but I also use color. So it's all whatever, Kathy. Okay, so I'm going to get into some blue. So I use the Winsor Blue Red shade as my complement to this orange. Okay, so if my triad, I take my yellow and my pink. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm nice and loud in my own ear. And then if I add a touch of blue, what does it do? Remember I said that if we mix our complements together, we can make a gray? Or if we add a touch of complement to the color, we gray the color. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm graying the color to make his skin. You know, our skin isn't usually orange. Look how dry my skin is. It's Arizona. Like, oh my gosh, I look like a lizard. Okay, all right. Yeah, at home it was so humid. Oh my gosh. All right, so, yeah, I live outside Buffalo, New York, and no, we don't get as much snow as Buffalo. And it's really not that bad, but. Okay, so because I want a soft edge here, right, I'm going to wet this. I'm not sure where I'm going yet, so I'll wet a significant amount here. Maybe I'll try to get that nose shadow in. How am I doing on time, Marion?
We're about 15 minutes in, 20 minutes in.
Really? That's how long it seems like longer. I'm sure you're all thinking the same thing. Isn't she done yet? Okay, so I'm getting this stamp. Actually, I probably shouldn't have wet his neck because I'm going to try to have a hard line here. So then I'll have to show you my skills and make sure that that this wash I'm making isn't too wet, okay? So again, I'm mixing up my orange. I need enough here to try to get around. And I never, you know, some people try to mix, like they try to mix all the orange for this painting. I don't do that stuff. I feel like if there's a little bit of a value change somewhere, here and there, and some different colors, I think it's going to make my painting look better, more interesting, you know. So let me actually start with a light wash of blue, and we'll see how that looks. I'll see. So the thing is, I have to have enough pink in my mixture to balance out the blue, don't I? Because if I don't, I'm going to get green. Which wouldn't actually be bad on this because he had a lot of green bouncing around. But like I say, if I'm doing a skin painting, I don't want to introduce another color. So I always think of that. I just juried a show down in...
So is that area still wet, or
I just re-wet this. Remember I re-wet this a minute ago?
short-term memory problem?
Okay. Yeah, I just did re-wet this because I want a soft edge here. Now here I want to be a little more careful. I want some orange there. So I'm just going to wipe that away with my finger. I like the way, something about using these colors together, they just glow, and that underwash is going to show through, and it's like, oh yeah. And this blue that I use dries quite a bit lighter. I got to hurry up here. Although he does have some texture in his neck. And I've got quite a bit of pencil here, but that's going to get covered up as I go. So far he looks pretty good. So remember I wet that? Let's see, I need more color here. I want to go darker. Let me get this smoothed out. Let me get a little blue in here. Right here. Uh-oh, am I running into trouble? Am I getting dry? Maybe. But I'll just make him look like he didn't shave today. I did a man for a reason. Because for that demo in Fort Worth, you know, there's people coming from Italy and all this stuff, and I didn't want to be up there embarrassing myself. And I thought, because I started with my granddaughter, took a beautiful reference photo of my granddaughter, and I started it, but it was, her skin is so smooth, all the soft edges, and it just looked like I was going to run into trouble. It was going to need too much careful painting. Okay, so I got a little bit of a mark right there. I can't go in here anymore. This is already setting up. So I have to know when to stop, and I'll dry it, and then I'll work under his nose or around his mouth area. Actually, I'd like you to come up and see it, and see the color right now, like just file dye. I want you to see how you can see all those colors at this point. Let me just get it. You can just walk right through the van here if you want. And I just want you to be able to see, want to walk by or whatever. But see how those colors are playing some nice together. Oh, yeah. Where's Liz? Liz. She says to me, hand cream's a must. She said, we're all actually in our 20s. They have to use a lot of lotion.
Wow.
You pop out. You pop out. I know. Yeah, it makes you just like you look more tired or something. Yeah, I have a lotion.
It's pretty close to the screen, I think. Okay. Looks different on the screen than here.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's why
Yeah, that's smart.
it's not that saturated. No.
Yeah, that was a quiet.
Yeah, I can tell you what that is. Just that. Oh, he wanted 1.4. Yes, I just like it.
Pretty true to the screen.
It's always so much more blue, isn't it?
I mean, the yellow looks a little more green on the
Can I
screen.
take a quick peek? Okay, all right, back to your seats. The party's over. Okay. Oh, yeah. Could I get somebody to take a picture of me painting for my social media? I don't really want the painting in, maybe just me like from the front, because I don't want the Fabrionic people to know what I'm doing. It's a secret.
So, no
Just,
painting.
well, just like we're not gonna, that's fine.
So just take it now.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay.
That's good, that's fine. All right. Okay, so now you saw where I was. Another thing that I can do, now he has a really important thing here, a light bounce. I always look for those. He's got some very good ones here, and that's one of the reasons that we want our work to be in the, you want a good light on your subject, no matter what it is. You're inside, you're outside, and I've been teaching for a long time, and I always tell my students, if the sun isn't out, go back in the house. You need the sun, because what does the sun do? It creates the value pattern for us. You can have a face that's backlit and stuff and make a good painting, but it's much more difficult. Like a professional photographer uses a flash, flattens it all out, and you're just making it a lot harder for you, for yourself to paint a good painting. Once we have, like, this isn't the type of picture you take to put on your mantle. This is the kind of picture you take to paint. So when we have sun on something, it creates light, medium, and dark, which is what we need to tell our story. So he's got a light bounce right here, up in here, right here. So he's got a bounce of light coming here, and it's lightening the outside of his nostril. And he's got one right here. Those help to show the contours, but they also entertain the eye and look really good. So let's come over. Where can I show you? All right, so let's do his nose. And he's got a complicated nostril going on. I won't go over there yet. Let's see, I'm wet still. So over here, let's see. So if I come down, so if I wet this, now I can have a smaller brush, and I can just wet where I want to go. Again, I want to put color right here, but I want this to be soft. I don't want a big hard edge, and he's got a white highlight right there. So I can leave, it's actually quite a hard edge there. Let's see, where is it? It's right about here. So I can leave that wet. That's okay to have a little bit of a hard edge right there. And then I can always soften that with a scrubby tool later. So I'm going to wet this side of the nostril. I'll come down into this shadow because I'm not sure how far I'm going to go. So I'll just get that all wet. Probably get a little color in there. Let me get this all wet. So what he's got going on here is he's got a pink, the color is yellow and pink with more, I'd say, well, maybe more pink than yellow in my ratio. Let's see how this looks. So what I want to do is, he's highlighted up there, but here it's a nice orange glow right there. So now when I put the shadow on, I want to come inside of that, and I want to leave that there. And I'm asking myself, is that intense enough? I mean, I don't want it to get dark, but I want some good color there, and I think it is. So now this color that I'm putting on, this orange, this can go under everything here, can it? Because if I'm going to build up the value we see here, if I put color on it now, it guarantees that it's going to have unity, and it's keeping the paper wet, right? Remember I said how my paper needs to stay evenly wet? So if I'm fiddling around up here now, then this is all evenly wet. I know that's wet, it's waiting for me, kind of letting that set up a little bit. I'll start laying in this big shadow shape here, get a little more value in here. And depending on how, experienced you are or whatever, we don't have to ever rush, unless we have a deadline, like I always seem to. But, we don't have to rush. We could do that much, and we can hair dry it and wet it again. Like, we don't have to, do the whole painting in 5 minutes. Like, I have a deadline, a self-imposed deadline for the American Watercolor Society. I love to go. I got my signature status a few years ago, and it was a big, exciting deal. And I just really like to go to the show because it's just a who's who of watercolor, and everybody's happy because they're in the show, and it's just a great time. So I have a reference that I took this summer. I have to, I always take my own reference photos, and I got my granddaughters to pose for me one day, and I took a reference. I'll show the studio people, or the workshop people, I'll show you the reference. But just a great reference of my granddaughter, and I'm turned it into more than the picture was by changing it up in Photoshop elements. So that's always something. Let me see if I can hold the line yet. I don't know if I can. If I've got too much water in my brush, I'm gonna blossom. I'm just seeing if it'll stay here where I want it. So now I'm gonna come outside, and I'm gonna cover that pencil line and start to build this shadow. And this brush is small. It's probably too small for what I'm doing. And I can see right away that I don't really have enough saturation here. Right along this edge and this edge, it's really bright pink. So I'm going to lay a little more color there. And then what I'm doing is, because I'm drying a little bit, see how I'm scooting? I'm scooting over. And I found that that's a great way to build up to my dark values without making a lot of marks on my paper. So let's try scooting again. Let's see here. What can we do, Al? What can we do?
By scooting, you mean barely touch?
I'm going like this. My brush was really too small for what I was doing, and I was already committed. I was already, involved. So what I did was, let me do it here. This is actually dry. Let me dampen this a little bit. So my brush was a little small for what I was doing. I also call this the windshield wiper because you can push paint. So I'm just wetting this a little bit. So if my brush is really too small and it's like you're in there working and you think, oh my gosh, I'm not covering enough territory. So I'm going to start to lay this paint down. But see how I'm going like this, up and down, up and down. I'm pushing it over. I didn't have enough water for it to travel on its own. That's a great way to add value to a dry area of your painting. So that's how I'll finish. I'll see a part here. So here, watch this. So here's his cheek. I don't know. I know I brought an eraser, but I don't see it handy. But I'd like to get that bit of pencil off right there. I don't know why I put it there. I always like to have as little pencil as possible. So I'm wetting his cheek. My brush was a little bit dirty. I want that to stay white. So I'm wetting this cheek. Let me switch out. Is there any questions? So I want to keep his nostril dry right there. And I want to lay this water in right through here. I want this to all transition. So I'm just dampening this. So now I'm going to lay some pretty intense pink right here. Okay, so see how I'm scooting? Scooting my brush over, pulling it over there. And then here I'm going to do that same thing. And come right up where that pencil is. Look how much control I have, you know? This is what it's all about. We don't have to put our watercolor on, and even on wet paper we can have soft edges. If somebody tells me that it looks like pastel, I think that's a compliment. You know, that it's so soft that they couldn't tell. So now, one of the things I did notice at the show today is some people, we got some nice dark backgrounds on paintings, but some of them are so thick, they look like they were put on with a spatula. That's not always the look that we're going for. And the thing is that you can't darken a color by keep putting it on. You know what I mean? If you want a color to be darker, you want to darken the color. So, and you know, black's kind of a different story, but we'll talk about that too. So this pink, if I wanted the pink to be darker, I don't want to keep putting pink on till it's thick here. I want to darken the pink itself, okay? So that's what I just did. And then I actually would like to push this back a little bit. So again, I'll use this same movement. I cleaned my brush, okay, cleaning it out, taking out my excess moisture. I want to push that over a little bit, so I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to do this movement. I could actually have a little color in my brush, a little more yellow, but there's a smidge of color there. So I come across here like this, then when I get to where I want to move it, I just go up and down the line, and I push it over like a snowplow. See how that moved that line for me? It's real soft, everything looks great. We got some color in here, some texture. There's more yellow in his skin. Let's see, what should I try to do? What do you want to see me do? How much time do I have?
Some hair.
Some hair?
Yeah, about 20 minutes.
20?
15, 20 minutes, and we're done.
Or more nose.
More nose? Why was I mixing this up? I was going to do something. Yeah, this isn't anywhere near where I'm going, value-wise. Let me do this other little nose piece, this other nostril. I drew these very carefully, and I did darken. Oh, I project my painting, my work, my paintings, I always do. There's people that, you know, use grids and freehand. I've rarely seen a freehand drawing that looks right, you know, unless you're, you know, I don't know, just really, really good. There's usually some distortion. There's nothing wrong with that, but I'm doing competitive painting, and I don't want to finish a painting and have it framed, which has happened to me, and I realize the head's too big, you know, or the eyes are too big. We tend to make the eyes too big. Everybody does it. Things are out of proportion, and I started projecting. One year I had, I think, 7 or 8 house commissions at Christmas time, because I was insane, and I shouldn't have taken them all, and I was so stressed out, and I was actually working as a gallery director at a frame place, just a small frame place, and the girl said, "Why don't you get a projector?" And I said, "Well, that's cheating." And she says, "Everybody uses them." And I was like, ugh. So of course I got one. I felt so guilty for years. I didn't want anyone to know. I thought they wouldn't think I was a real artist. And, I talked to my kids and everything. And then, do any of you, are you familiar with Nicholas Simmons? He passed away. Did you, Nicholas? He came to Buffalo and he did a demo. Oh, I just mixed up a little color. I'm just talking and painting. Let me wet this. He came to Buffalo and he talked about the taboo subject of the projector. And he said, I can draw. He goes, I'll draw something for you right now. He said, but I can't draw perfectly if it's really big. And he said, I'm not apologizing to anybody. He says, I know there's people out there that are using it, and they don't admit it. And he said, I use it. And my gosh, he, was just doing so well in his career. And I just thought, if he can tell everybody that he's using it, I'm going to tell people. And I went home and told my husband after I saw the demo. So I wet all this, and now I'm turning up that pink that I see here. It's very intense, like when light comes through skin, and it's almost like we can see the blood through the thing a little bit. So I'm really turning up right here, really turning up my saturation. So I went home and told my husband, I said, I'm going to tell people that I use a projector. And he says, oh, I don't think it's a good idea. People aren't going to like it. And I said, I'm doing it. I want that monkey off my back. And so I started telling people, I felt so much better. And I thought, if you want to think I'm not an artist, I don't care. It makes my life, I would much rather play with my grandchildren than spend a week drawing a painting. So that's just the way it is. But anyway, so I use a projector, digital. So I'm re-wetting this and turning up the saturation. And this is what I'll do. I'll go around this painting until I have enough value and enough saturation everywhere. And now I'm using this brush to smooth it out, see? I am ambidextrous, which is handy. Right here I'm going to throw a little of this color. So I'm building the shape of his cheek by noticing where this color goes. So I'm just dampening slightly and dropping on more saturated color. I have so much control right now. It's just great. So now I'm going to come up here with this. This is wet on dry. And I'm just scooting, looking at my reference, always using my reference. I've painted this man so many times, and I do not remember exactly where his wrinkles are. So I always want to be looking. And I find sometimes in the workshop, if someone's struggling, and I come around and I'll say, where's your reference? Oh, it's in my bag over there. And I'll say, well, I think you should have it up here where you can see it. So we get it out and I set it up there and I say, keep looking at it. Don't look at the painting that I painted. Look at your reference. Because if you copy a painting that I've done, try to do it, you're not learning. You have to, I'm showing you what's possible. Then you have to look at it and say, okay, I see that there's blue in this. I'm going to try that. We don't have to copy someone else step by step to learn how to paint. It's more of, I think, learning the potential of what can be done, So I'm just slowly finding some of these little spots. Those all go out into wrinkles. Another thing, so I'm going to take just a touch of this dry blue in my palette, and now I'm going to run it down through this right there to darken that area. Go back into a little orange, and then I'll kind of blend them together, and then that'll make that, create that little shadow that's right there, and it kind of smoothed it all out real nice. I was going to say something else and I lost track of my thought.
Do you ever paint from black and white?
Well, not in the sense you're asking me, but I did a painting of my grandson, and I took all the color out of the background for a reason. So, remember I said I'm using color to direct your eye where I want you to look. I don't want to, well, this is pretty simple with a portrait. I mean, obviously you're going to look at his face. But if I had some other stuff going on, I make you look where I have, so if I really want you to look at his eyes, that's where my most detail is. That's where my contrast is. And by the way, there is no, did I put mask on here? Oh, I did put mask. I put a few hairs, because I just felt some right there. I had put some there and I just wiped it off. But I never put mask here. What we see highlights here, don't ever mask on a face like that. You're just gonna have big hard chunks all over the place. Very bad idea. I think I tried to maybe do a couple eyebrows. It's too hard to get it thin, and I would rather pull it out later with masking tape and a scrubby tool or a razor blade. I'll pull these little things out with a razor blade. It's much easier to control. Let's see if I can go into this cheek and get a darker, you want to see that, a darker layer of cheek? That's the hard part, honestly, that's the hardest thing, is to get up to those darks and not make a mess. One of the tricks, I photographed a girl yesterday, and I did, she had a necklace on, and I had her wear something up by her neck, but now the one of my granddaughter I was talking about, she had straps with a low décolleté turned aside, no necklace, so I had to try to be smooth all through here. Very difficult. I forgot to photograph the paintings, Liz. Would you photograph like the paintings in your house, like Sarah and all the ones you have, and send them, because I want to show them Sarah.
Okay.
I don't think it's on my website. But I painted my niece Sarah, and that was one of the hardest paintings because I painted her head like this big, and the transition between that neck and décolleté, I don't know how, I looked at it the other day and it gave me goosebumps. I thought, how did I do that? Okay, so this is another thing. Right here I have a black or a blue, no, I don't want to do that because I was going to wet this. But at the end, I have a blue line landed here. You'd take a damp brush and scoot that in as well and just blot it. But I don't want to wet this part right now because I'm coming down with a wash. Okay, so again, now I want to stay away from this area where it's going to have the light bounce. And I'll come about right there. Now, I want a soft, this is a soft edge. So actually I'll come past it. Come past, if I want a soft edge, I come past where I'm painting. Here's a hard edge right here. This is hard, so I leave this dry, okay? See the difference? So here, this is kind of a soft edge here, and then this is a hard edge. So I leave the paper dry on the other side of a hard edge. So let me just get this again evenly wet. And I'm not worried if I go outside the lines a little bit, I'll clean it up later, okay? Now if I was in my studio and I really, you know, I just needed more time to get this wash in, I would wet the back again, and then I would press it with a piece of plexiglass, go in and make some tea or something. Speaking of which, I should have a sip of water. I would make some tea and then come back to work. All right. So I want to get some bold color here. Let's see. His cheek right here is pink. Along the shadow line, I want a little bit of a bleed right here. Remember I wanted a soft edge? So I'm putting some good juicy color in. Okay, and I want to just cover everything again because it's all his face, right? Up here, so I'm gonna throw the color right here where I didn't wet, because that's where it's going to be orange. Worry about that later. Right here, let that bleed out a little bit, I hope. Right here. Okay, so we get that on. Hurry up, Kathy. Yellow, pink, too much pink. Don't wipe it out with a tissue. Go to and make another puddle. Hurry up. I wanted a bounce here. So this, I'm going to put this orange in here, and then I'm going to stay away from there. This can bleed out a little bit, and this is tight. So I want to hurry up and hit everything with this orange. And then if I can keep it evenly wet, I can come back and we'll put a layer of blue in again. So again, it's all about knowing that if you have to get out, if I have to get out and stop. Okay, Al, so far so good. Oh, what did I forget right here? And this gets quite blue here, so I'm just gonna, you'll be surprised, this looks such like it doesn't quite look right now, and I'll make it work. Okay, so, all right, let's try some blue. Now, you know, that's all evenly wet. I still don't want to go in there with a really loaded wet brush. I want it loaded with color. So see how I tamp off, and it's like I know how wet I am. So let's go somewhere where I won't mind if I'm a little too dark. So I'll come over here where his temples are. Now that's dry. So I'm getting a little dry brush there, which actually works great. Okay, so that's a lot of blue, isn't it? So I'm going to come into my palette, I'm going to take some of that color out, and I'll go into this pink and yellow. Just lighten that up a little bit. Let me feel this one. Let's try this. I didn't say my prayers. Jesus help me. Okay. Let's see here. So I want to come under. Remember now here I was going to come under, bless you, and show that bounce. Here, let's come up here. Quickly now, quickly. Okay, more blue. So go into the blue. Oh, it's nerve-wracking. Okay, less water. Through here. Oh no. I think I was a little too wet, so I can't stop now. I can't stop. I want to spread it out. I was a little too wet, so get it evenly wet again. Hurry up and get it evenly wet. So let's see right here. Like when you start to have a problem like that, don't just say, oh, you gotta move. And you know, and that happens. And because I'll come around and say, it's an emergency, watch out. And I grab the sprayer. If it's really gone south, the only thing you can do is wet the whole thing. You know, so say everything's going great and this is your entry for the big show and you're all excited, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh no. Then you go back in with a big brush, just wet that whole thing, and then you can rework it. So don't ever despair. Sometimes I put them right over the sink and spray it. So I've got some uneven wetness. This is what we don't want. But because it's a man, I may be okay. You know, it really makes a difference. Okay, so far so good. Coming in here, this is drier right here. So right here I want to get a little bit of pink and yellow, very dry in my brush, hopefully. And I want to come under here. I'm starting to dry brush. So again, thank God it's a man or I'd be in trouble. So here, so now between this transition of wetter paper and this transition, very light, very, very gentle. Get it in there, get out of there. Here he's got a wrinkle that finds the edge of his chin. So I'm throwing that in with this huge brush. Okay. I think I got out of this alive. I think I gotta stop brushing. Okay, so I've got a little weirdness right here, but it's okay because he's still not as dark as he's going. So it's like, I didn't ruin it. You know, so maybe the next thing I would do, let this dry. I still have some beautiful colors happening. He needs to be a little darker. But another thing, don't have to go as dark as my reference necessarily. Okay, so sometimes we don't see how good something is because we're focused on something else in our minds. So if I was just painting this for myself, I would get up to this value. And actually now looking at this, I'm thinking, that might be a little too dark. I don't want it to look like a thing on his face. So we got to be a little careful with that. So I would get that in, get up to the value I think I wanted here, get it to match over here, because this has got to rest now. This can't be painted anymore. Probably today. It would be good not to be in there today. Now if I was painting this at home, I'd get some hair in, I'd get some shirt, some sweater to balance so I can see where my values are going, okay? So how are we doing? You ready for me to be done or what?
Just about done.
Just about done? Oh, okay, then I'll stop. I was gonna say, so to paint the gray t-shirt, and actually I think I'll think about this in my hotel room, maybe I'd want to leave that t-shirt yellow. You know, maybe I don't want another gray there. I'll have to think about that. But if I'm putting it gray, I put the yellow, the pink, then the blue. Let them swim together so that I get that, you know. But you'll be able to see when you come up, I've got a little bit, I got it right there, I put a little too much water on. I'm not worried about it. Not only, I'll let it dry overnight, sometimes just the act of rebrushing it with water will help smooth that, and then I'll go in with some glue and it'll be fine. Here I got up to a pretty good value. So if you want to come up and look, you can.
Well, I make one quick announcement before you all leave. I forgot to announce that Western Fed has extended their entry date until October 14th from the 11th. So you've got over the weekend if you still want to get an entry into Western Fed. Thank you.
I'm going to be a juror at Western Fed in 2027, I think. Something like that, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, great.